Today, we are diving into something that can literally make or break a company, how you structure your teams. If you get this right, everything just flows. But if you get it wrong, well, that's where the chaos begins. So let's get into it.
Oh, you know that feeling, right? You're sitting in a meeting, a big project has completely stalled out, and everyone is just kind of looking around thinking, wait, who's actually supposed to make the final call here? It is one of the most frustrating things in any workplace.
But here's the thing. It's so easy to blame people in those moments. But what if I told you that confusion almost never comes down to bad or incompetent people? Nope, it's about a bad blueprint. The entire system was pretty much designed to fail from the start. So let's start right there. Let's really unpack the difference between a structure that just creates chaos and one that actually builds order and gets things done. I mean, the signs are pretty obvious when you lay them out. On one side, you've got total chaos. People doing the same work without realizing it, decisions taking forever, and nobody really owning the outcome. But on the other side, with a good structure, you get order, crystal clear purpose, teams working together smoothly, and workloads that actually make sense. And this is the solution. An organizational structure isn't just some boring chart you hang on the wall. No way. It's the actual living process of putting people into the right groups, making it super clear who's in charge of what, and making sure everyone is rowing in the same direction to hit those big goals. Okay, so with that in mind, let's dig into the 3 most common blueprints companies use to build out their teams. And you'll see, each one has its own serious pros and cons. First up, we've got the classic, the functional structure. This is probably the one you've seen a million times. It's basically organized into these expert silos, right? You've got all the designers in one department, all the engineers in another, all the testers in a third, and so on. Now, the huge advantage here is that you get these deep pockets of expertise. It's super efficient, but, and this is a big but, those walls between departments can become massive communication barriers, and that can really, really slow things down when you need different teams to work together. So where does this model really shine? Well, it's pretty much perfect for stable companies that are laser-focused on doing one thing and doing it incredibly well. If you're all about mastering a single product, this might just be the blueprint for you. All right, next up is the divisional structure. Now with this one, instead of grouping people by their job skill, you group them by what they're actually working on. You can almost think of them as these little mini companies living inside the bigger company, each one focused on its own product or its own market. What's great about this model is the clarity. It's amazing. Everyone in a division knows they are responsible for its success, and they can make decisions fast without needing to check with a bunch of other departments. The catch? Well, you often end up with duplicated resources. Like every division has its own marketing team, and sometimes it can create a bit of a rivalry between the different units. This structure is really built for big, diversified companies. So say you're a massive construction firm that builds everything from hospitals to bridges. A divisional setup lets each team focus completely on its own unique project without getting distracted. And that brings us to our third blueprint, which is definitely the most complex of the bunch, the matrix structure. This is a hybrid. So, for example, a software developer might report to the head of engineering for things like career growth, but they'd also report to a specific project manager for their day-to-day tasks. The matrix really gets to the heart of a central challenge. Its biggest strength is its incredible flexibility. You can pull in exactly the experts you need for any project. But the huge risk, as you can imagine, is that having 2 bosses can cause a ton of confusion and conflict if your communication isn't absolutely flawless. So this structure really comes alive in super dynamic environments. Think of engineering firms where new projects are constantly spinning up and shutting down, and each one needs a totally different mix of technical skills. That's where the matrix can be a game changer. Okay, so we've got our 3 blueprints, but let's be real. A blueprint is just a piece of paper if nobody knows who has the authority to actually build the thing. This brings us to the really critical question: who is actually calling the shots? To figure that out, we need to get 4 ideas straight. First, authority is simply the right to make a decision. Then you have responsibility, which is the duty to actually do the work. Third is accountability. That's being on the hook for the final result. And finally, delegation is how a manager passes authority down. For any role to work, these 4 things have to be in perfect balance. And that brings us to what might be the single most important takeaway here. Delegation is the engine of any effective organization. Seriously,
When you do it right, you empower your experts, you make the entire company more efficient, and you free up your managers to think about the big picture instead of getting stuck in the weeds.
Because look, no matter which fancy structure you pick, at the end of the day, it all comes down to the actual teams doing the work. So what is it that makes a team truly great?
Well, it really boils down to 4 key ingredients. First, role clarity. Every single person knows exactly what they're supposed to be doing. Second, shared goals. Everyone's pulling in the exact same direction. Third is mutual trust. People have to feel psychologically safe and supported. And finally, you need constant feedback loops so the team can learn and get better over time. And remember, within any of these big structures, teams can look very different. You've got your standard functional teams, all from the same department. You can build powerful cross-functional teams with people from all over the company. Some organizations even have self-managed teams that operate with a ton of autonomy. And then there are quality circles, which are small groups focused on solving very specific problems. Okay, let's wrap this all up and make it practical. How do you take all these ideas and actually design the perfect blueprint for your own team or your company?
Here are the golden rules you need to follow. First, make sure every person has just one main boss. That's unity of command. Second, don't let managers have too many people reporting to them. That's span of control. You also want to group tasks logically, make sure departments are talking to each other, and, maybe most importantly, build a system that can actually change when it needs to. Be flexible.
And that brings us to one last big question to think about. These principles have been the bedrock of organizations for decades. But now, in a world of remote work, global teams, and even AI coworkers, what kind of new blueprints are we going to need to invent for the future of how we work together? It's going to be interesting to see. Thanks for tuning in.